Hey friends, hopefully this thing is on and everything is working and you can hear me. My name's Timothy, though some people do call me Tim, and today we're going to have a bit of a Q&A with some pre-submitted and some live questions. So if you're out there, make sure that you tell me in the chat so that I know that people are watching, and also so that I can get your questions for later on. I'll be opening up the Q&A to be able to actually receive those, but for now, we're sort of taking our way through the pre-subs. So hopefully you can see this and everything is working smashingly, and if not, then I guess we will be in a world of trouble, as hopefully you will at some point tell me that I'm doing it wrong and that the technology is failing me. Uh, we're going to dive right on in, and we have a whole one vote letting us know who with the top question, just in case time is a concern. We're going to take those in order by the poll. You can find that over in the chat feature there, and let's get to it. So, what combo do you fear? This question was brought to us by Matthew, who asked, out of all possible classes and alignment combinations, what's the combination you would fear for a PC in terms of campaign course? Now, I would hesitate to imply that there's ever actually going to be one specific that would be my problem, but in general, I don't allow a lot of evil characters in my campaigns without a fair amount of scrutiny. Evil characters in my world and headcanon, etc., means that we're talking about selfish characters, and selfish characters don't make a ton of sense in a Dungeons and Dragons game just because it's kind of designed to be a cooperative affair. And for that same reason, that's the issue that comes up class-wise as well. Probably the hardest class to pull off would be the assassin subclass rogue, with a neutral or evil alignment that's all about getting the drop on their foes alone so that they can score that sweet, sweet double damage auto crit nonsense that you can pull off with the assassin. Great fun if everybody else is having fun. But that one's the one that I would say is the toughest to actually pull off for uh, individual combos. When it comes to the actual campaign course, then hard opposites are challenging for when you have players that are really invested in their role play. If the players really get into it and are positive that they want that specific response. So hard opposites, I would worry, and then any lone wolf character styles, particularly in class subtypes and the like, I would be concerned about. And then selfish characters, whether they actually identify themselves as evil or it's just something that you can spot from their backstory or design. Hope that helps, Matthew. All right. Our next question was submitted by Spencer, who commented that I have a lot of content ideas on my shorts, and he asked, have you ever thought about running a homebrew campaign and putting a higher price tag on the session? So as a professional DM, I mostly run campaigns and games that are from published sources, and then I modify and adjust them to my own intents and purposes. Particularly, I like to build them out so they're actually a full up to level 20 affair instead of something that only goes to 11th or 15th. Um, I have considered creating straight homebrew campaigns, but I haven't necessarily considered that that would be something that was worth a higher price tag. So I think that a homebrew campaign is an awesome thing to run, but I'm not confident that my homebrew campaign would be so much better than my published campaign that it would be worth the higher price tag for the player that was involved in it. Certainly, the amount of effort that would be put in, I could see justifying it, but I just don't know that I could deliver that much a superior experience that I could justify raising my prices. And for me, it's all about the experience that the players are receiving. Um, Next question. Hopefully that answered yours, Spencer. Next one is brought to us by Keith. who asked for ideas for downtime. He said, I'd love to see specific examples. In first edition, assassinations were a downtime activity, for example. Do you use downtime activities to prep for next session? Example, the rogue uses downtime to case a possible target. Do you use downtime during sessions or only between? Thank you. I appreciate the thank you. So, hmm, I run a lot of pre-published adventures, which means I run a lot of adventures that already have a ticking clock that is somewhere out there, and in a lot of cases that put pressure on the characters to continue consistently instead of lagging back and letting things go to long periods of downtime. Because of that, my downtime in my current games is relatively minimal in terms of uh, how many people get involved in it. But mostly I run downtime as like a fill in the queue with what you would like to do during the out of game portion. And then I bring it to a game portion and either resolve swiftly one after the other or highlight key scenes at the table. If it's going to be, boring shopping and the selling of loot, we try to get that as off screen as possible to limit those with just highlights from that. If there's something that's important or somebody wanted to try to focus more on the particular sale of a particular item, or they weren't getting the price they wanted, something like that, or if there was any kind of event that happened during that. So to answer your question, I guess most of downtime I consider to be still at the table worthy, as long as it's submitted beforehand so that I can quickly run through it, or else as just a straight up at the table affair. But if you were going to, for instance, attempt to case a possible target, like the example you had there, that's a perfect example of something that a player could submit beforehand, and then you could give them the results of at the table so they could use that information. It is something that you could abstract out and not go into the nitty gritty details and just assume a level of competence on the part of the rogue, maybe make a check or two or have them do so at the table to determine from some outcomes that could come from what they did. But in all cases, there just have to be careful that your fail states are not, and then you get caught by the authorities and go down without a fight, because obviously some fail states are going to lead to at the table play that requires a lot of attention and time, and you don't want that to be what takes over the remainder of your session, particularly not if it's one person's action and everybody else is left by the wayside. You can have moments like that where you're highlighting things, but you've got to make sure that you can spread the spotlight around the table to as many people as possible. Uh, I hope that answers the question, Keith. I don't think it gives specific examples, but I'd like to dive into this one deeper as a full-on topic at one point. And I think that maybe then I would be able to give you some examples of where the downtime system, as it's written in the current books, succeeds and fails. Um, I'll just spoiler alert and say that it kind of fails with the whole 10-day time blocks or week-long time blocks or whatever specific time length that they chose for downtime that applies to every single kind of action. I realize it makes sense for keeping people's time at the table managed, but it kind of fails in the narrative. So that keep an eye out for that one, and I'll have a video for you at some point, Keith. Uh, Unsi, your question: what are your favorite ways to balance an encounter when one of the PCs is a Twilight cleric? This one's a fun topic to say the least. Twilight clerics and other broken classes, I'm looking at you, Echo Knight, do definitely play a role in changing how campaigns can run and the kind of danger level that you can throw at a group with their survivability. And so typically, I play a lot of my encounter balance by ear these days because I've been playing hundreds of games a year and 4 years, and I have been DMing for like 28 years, something like that. So it's fairly off the cuff for me to decide whether or not a little more or a little less is needed in any encounter in order to balance things up. For most specific classes that are involved in encounter, I try not to balance my encounter specifically based on that particular character, particularly not when it's something like the Twilight Cleric that has a specific number of uses of their ability in between short rests. Rather, I take a more long-term approach of consistently trying to challenge my group with a sufficient number of encounters in an adventuring day that they have to manage their resources, that they aren't always sure that they can count on getting a short rest, or that they might be interrupted in a short rest, so that things like the Twilight Sanctuary ability can't pop off in absolutely every single encounter. And then I sprinkle all those encounters out. And when those encounters are triggered, the creatures react accordingly. For me personally, the Twilight Cleric that I've had running around, when they light up with shining skin like the moon, and put off this big aura that suddenly makes everybody around them harder to hurt. Almost any creature with any kind of common sense can fire at that point become one overcoming the temper, making the cleric think about when they're going to this out there, when they're going to use that ability. So I think that is most of what I do is in combat tactics versus specific abilities, and then in creating a scenario that has enough of a danger that anybody who might be involved in it is going to have concern about whether or not they're going to get their next rest, whether they should be hoarding or spending their resources. And that goes a long way towards balancing out classes that have super powerful individual abilities like this, because that uncertainty means that it doesn't show up in every encounter. And so some encounters they're going to dominate because of that ability, and other ones they just won't. Unseen, thanks for the question. That's a fun one, and believe me, I definitely resonate with the difficulties that it can feel like we're getting when we get some powerful creatures, powerful characters put into our parties. All right, Brett Wilson asked, I was wondering on your thoughts and musings on gargantuan monsters and giving players the ability to climb the bosses for better combative opportunities. And as a similar item, he also added the idea of phased boss encounters or bosses with many forms as an additional question. Uh, When it comes to gargantuan monsters and giving players the ability to climb the bosses, some of that is absolutely rules as written, or at least a variant. I think it's just straight up rules. But if the size category of your opponent is large enough, then giving the option to grapple in order to be riding slash climbing the monster instead of being more traditionally grappling it to stop it from moving becomes an option, because you can't stop something from moving if it's I think it's more than two size categories larger than you. So medium-sized creatures trying to stop huge sized creatures just end up attached to their leg, and that's a great time with giants. uh, I personally just leverage that mechanic and encourage players that want to be climbing on the Colossus or the like to be utilizing the athletics skill to be able to do so as he's trying to shake them off potentially, or ignoring them, at which point they can utilize the grappling action to get there, and they don't have to worry about those other checks and the like. Similarly, you can lean into that deeper to have the ongoing fight, and perhaps a easy way to adjust an encounter so that climbing the Colossus becomes a more exciting, memorable, or suitable opportunity would be like the traditional fire giant, coated in heavy plate mail from head to toe with massive amounts of armor just protecting him. But of course, not wearing a helmet because helmets aren't cool. And when your hair looks like it's made out of fire, you don't want to take off your helmet at home and look like you got mad hat hair. That'd be bad, right? So, if you instead made it so that somebody who climbed the Colossus to get close enough was able to attack directly at the head, even though they wouldn't be able to directly harm the creature by poking out its eyes or the like, unless you're going to go down a called shot route. What you can do is lower the armor class of that giant for anybody who is close enough to threaten that vital point. Uh, I recommend avoiding giving the same option universally to, for instance, to like ranged opponents, because they're already in the optimal space and they don't need any help getting stronger, unless you wanted to do something like shooting at them from afar or with a spell required a called shot, a disadvantage on the attack roll. While if you had already climbed the Colossus, you could attack in such a fashion without disadvantage, allowing the melee guy to feel awesome for climbing on this guy and kicking his butt. Uh, that's at a quick muse what I would do with gargantuan creatures to allow some cool climbing moments. Phased bosses and bosses with many forms. 100% down for these. Big B's Presents Glory of the Giants is actually, in my opinion, a better example of this than, for instance, the mythic creatures that came out, including the ones that were included for like great worms and the aspects of Tiamat in Fizzbands. I like what they did with Fizzbands and the like for the mythic recharge of hit points, but sometimes it really rubs me wrong. If you're going to do a phased boss encounter, triggering the phase change should not come at 0 points. It should come at phases of the creature's strength and abilities, and that way you don't feel like you're about to go down and it disappears. Now, admittedly, you can just change this in your narration, unless you're using something like a virtual tabletop, and you totally just should change your narration on that. But by setting threshold points of damage that need to be received in order to go into the next stage, and then having changes, you create really awesome encounters. It's probably how Oral should have been presented in the Icewind Dale, so that you didn't feel like you just defeated her only to find out that you had to do it twice more. Putting that at a third of her hit points and having those changes take place would have felt like a much more stage boss encounter. The reason that Big B's does such a great job is with its cradles of the scions, is that they're two different creatures, one of which you have to defeat in order to reach the other creature, which for me is really exciting and I think makes for a much better turnaround in situation. Uh, I've just been noticing we've been getting some great questions in the chat here. I am going to go ahead and open up the Q&A, which I have no idea how this works. Submit questions, and we will see if that is something that you guys are able to engage with. I've never actually utilized this before on one of these lives. So if you want to put your questions in there, I'll go ahead and jump in on those after we get done with these, and then I'll troll the chat like I'm really hunting like crazy person to see if I can get more there. But it looks like the chat log will only let me scroll up so far. So yeah, pop them in the Q&A if you can. I apologize. Apparently I should have opened that sooner. This is the first time. Hopefully it won't be the last. Brett, I hope that answers your questions and gives you some ideas to play with. Phase boss encounters sound awesome. Let me know what you come up with, because I'm always looking for a good boss encounter. Jacob asked, how do you go about balancing an encounter? If you have a 6-person group of level 5 adventurers, do you know what the hardest or highest armor class should be? Do you have a cap in mind for the amount of enemies? Things of that nature. So, armor class, no. Armor class, I don't look at when I'm balancing an encounter because bounded accuracy of 5th edition makes that a fairly non-existent point. The CR system, for all of its wonkiness and issues, does actually manage to tell you roughly how many hit points and the armor class and the damage output of a specific creature when it's been calculated correctly. So the armor class is kind of immaterial because you don't need to know what it is. Whereas some of those other calculations go off the mark much quicker and easier. Pardon me. So instead of trying to balance encounter based on what kind of abilities things have, how many hit points they've got, how many whatever. Instead of doing that, create a scenario that works for the situation that you've got. And in a lot of cases, you can let the players balance themselves. Now, that doesn't always work because there are going to be situations where you're creating something that your players might not have the opportunity to properly know beforehand what they're walking into. And so a little bit of care can be useful. But as a general rule, I for a 6-man group, I try not to go above 6 creatures on the field unless there's a value in the swarm feeling. I would rather increase the damage of creatures that is on the field rather than increase the number of them or the hit points involved. Um, and most of the time, the tactics that I'm using determine the strength of the creature more so than the individual pieces of the individual. Gosh, I don't even know the right question. Uh, the individual creature's abilities are not necessarily the be all and end all. Instead, finding something that narratively fits, that has no major discrepancy in CR to where you're looking at something that's way out of left field. And at like 5th level and onwards, you can pretty much go with that, and you're not going to run into too many problems because the players can self-select. Of course, Jacob, I know that you in particular are one of my players. Thank you, man. And I know that you've got into some interesting situations because Animal House likes to dive into fully loaded ships full of long giants. When it came to balance on that encounter, that encounter was not balanced at all. That encounter was absolutely outrageous, and y'all should have taken that in a different manner. But you still pulled it off because you had really cool abilities and you used your stuff well, and so you survived, and that's what counts. But that encounter was not balanced to be a this is possible for your group, but rather a this is what mans this longship, and you should be very, very worried about dealing with that. And you guys killed it. You did a great job. So sometimes it's not about balancing the individual encounter, and instead it's about balancing the situation and letting players self-select on how dangerous they feel like that situation is going to be. Obviously, telegraphing danger is absolutely key on that. I will harp on that until the end of time. So telegraphing is the big deal because you can't not balance encounters and not telegraph encounters. Because if things are not balanced to make it possible for your party, then they need to know about it enough in advance to be able to make decisions to make it balanced for themselves. They find an entire army of hobgoblins is fine if they find out about it from its trail and follow it and try to figure out how to pick off individuals to bring it down to size. Not fine if they walk around a corner and are in the sights of 100 longbows. Big difference. All right. we have gotten through the pre-submitted questions. Nicaris, I see you got to submit questions in the descriptions question. There should be a Q&A option for you to drop them into the world. But for now, I would say if you can't find that, just go ahead and drop them in the chat specifically, and I'll pull questions from there for the next little while. So I'm going to scroll up, and it looks like the first question, hopefully, by Progressive D&D is feel like players in an encounter with a couple vampires, one of the PCs has been charmed. How should the PC react? Does he fight no one? Does he only fight the other vampire? Does he react to his homies fighting his charmer? All right, this is a solid question. And charm is a tricky subject at the best of times. I'm going to bring up Vampire's Charm on D&D Beyond just so that I have the specific text to refer to for this one. In the case of a vampire whose charm is not necessarily the same as all others, they, as an action, target a humanoid. It must make a saving throw or be charmed. The charmed target regards the vampire as a trusted friend to be heeded and protected. Although the target isn't under the vampire's control, it takes the vampire's requests or actions in the most favorable way it can and is a willing target for the vampire's bite attack. And then when it takes some kind of harmful damage from a companion of the vampire, then he gets a repeat saving throw. Otherwise, it lasts for 24 hours or until the vampire lets it go or it's destroyed or is on a different plane of existence, right? Some fairly major ones. Okay, so charm of a vampire has lots of specifics that you can give to a player in terms of prompts of how they should be portraying themselves. It says that they become a trusted friend and should be heeded. However, it does not say that they blindly obey. In fact, it specifically calls out that they're not under the control of the vampire. So ask your player in those situations. One way to guide player actions towards the kind of behavior that we consider to be correct when it comes to very questionable mechanics like this is to talk to them about it with and it's to encourage them by giving them more specifics. You can say something along the lines of, having fallen under the charm of the count, you fall into this spell of feeling very close to him. You trust what he has to say, and everything he says to you, you take in the most favorable light. Right now, he's saying, your friends have been replaced by doppelgangers, and they're trying to hurt me. You should be accepting that this guy is somebody that you trust, but your friends are shouting out, no, 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 it's not true. He's put you under some kind of a spell. Well, you have to take the other guy in the greatest of light, and you don't necessarily have to take your friends in that because you haven't been forced to by magic. Perhaps you might side a little with the vampire, but at the same time, what if he's wrong? Would you really want to kill your friends? Maybe not. Maybe you want to work against them without trying to kill them and find ways to subdue or block or stop them from harming your trusted friend. You can talk them down off of the edge of the cliff. You can stand in the way of their blows. We can give options like that to the players to give them those choices on that first individual portion. We can also just end the recap at the beginning of each character's turn. I like to jump back to what happened just before and jump to what's coming and give a little bit of context as to like the most important thing that's going on right now. So you can remind them every time, still feeling the charm effect and under the vampire's sway, you are not certain that your allies are not replaced by doppelgangers. How do you act? Now, different players are going to respond to charm in very different ways. Different players have different tolerances for charm in very different ways. Some people find it to be very, very off putting to the point of being a distasteful thing, at which point sometimes it may be better for you to take control of their character, which I very rarely suggest doing, or it might be worth thinking about not involving those players in those situations too often. Don't don't reward bad behavior if they're just being jerks about it, but uh, find ways to encourage them through it, or to utilize other people in those situations if that's possible. Give them that little bit of a recap, and most of the time, players will be able to make better decisions. Also, feel free to call them on their nonsense if they're like, "Well, I'm charmed, but I don't want to do this, so I'm gonna like strictly full to the letter of the law and avoid doing the thing that's actually what I should be doing." Call them out and say, "Hey, you're under a charm effect. You really should be doing more to protect your friend than that. What could you do instead?" And give them an opportunity to make a better choice. All right. Let's see what else we got out here. How do you know if you're adding too much into a pre-written module, says Nakaris. I'm playing Curse of Strahd and they want to go to level 20, like you mentioned. What would you suggest adding to get there, with it not becoming a cat and mouse game for level 20's sake? So I I play a lot of that by ear. It is a lot easier when running any kind of game, whether it's a one shot or a full campaign. It is actually easier to delete than it is to add. So my general advice is that you find ways to build up the campaign, follow hooks, create additional material based on the things that people are interested in, drop little hooks everywhere and see what people pick up and bite. And especially with Curse of Strahd, you can allow it to go on for as long as it takes, building things up and letting them explore these different hooks while Strahd is manipulating them and not feeling the need to finish them off because he doesn't feel like they're actually a threat yet. And then in the late game at the 18 to 18, 19, 20 sort of range, all the way up in that point, you can have Strahd finally be like, all right, these guys are actually figuring out this whole adventuring nonsense. It's time to get them over here and take care of them. Either they could have been already wandering in and out of the castle a few times as he manipulates them to do his bidding, while encountering them very briefly using magic to escape, or the secret doors and special abilities of the vampire to do so. Uh, but then eventually he forces the showdown. Having that finale already figured out, that he can force the showdown, you have the option to decide the end of the campaign, because that moment when he does the showdown and loses is the highest point of tension in your campaign. Once you've hit the highest point of tension in your campaign, all that's left is wrap up. And you want to do that in as few hours as possible, frankly. So add. Don't worry about what you're adding in there into too much, but add in small, manageable chunks that you can then delete. So if you have a small side quest into an Ankeg lair, you can throw that in there. You can throw in a crumbling ruin and let them explore and encounter things. You can give rumors of an order of goodly people that have managed to survive in the mountains, and you can run down that plot line. Go through all of those that the players are interested in until your final climax ready to trigger, and then lure them in, encounter them, get them to want to come to that encounter, trigger that final encounter, and then denouement, get the story wrapped up and finished. And maybe you'll have created like 20 or 30 different hooks. Your players showed interest in 10 of them. They managed to get through 5 of them. But then when that final encounter hits, we are closing this campaign. And all of those little things that didn't necessarily get taken care of, uh, we can resolve with some quick Q&A after the session's over, kind of thing, and just tell them how it could have gone or would have gone, or what they hear when they ask about it later after the final encounter is over, that sort of thing. I hope that helps, Nakaris. Um, let's see, questions. 200 character limit is rough. I apologize on that one. Let's see if there's anything in the Q&A, it doesn't look like it's showing me anything in there. So I'm assuming that your questions have all been dropped into the chat here. Well, guys, if there's any other questions that you have, we've got a little bit more time. So feel free to drop this in here. In the meantime, I'll do a shameless plug for the channel, of course. We've just passed 3,000 subscribers a little bit ago. Thank you so much for your support and help in that. And if you haven't told everybody that you know about the channel yet, if you do that, that would be really helpful. I also really would love it if we got more Monday musing ideas. I'm always excited to see what you guys want answered and what kind of questions you have, and that would be great to get into. So definitely drop those kinds of things, and consider, because I'm hoping to make this a monthly thing. Consider you sign up form that is in the description for this particular video to send out a question for February's Q&A, and I'll do my best to answer anything that I can, and anything that's a little too long, naturally, I'll try and do a musing video on the topic so that we can get as much as possible out there. This is a load of fun for me, and I'm really enjoying getting the chance to answer questions and to hear all of your creative moments. And as side gigs go, this one's pretty stinking fun, even if it doesn't support itself. It's a lot of fun, and I'm excited to be on this journey with you. Got a couple of questions. Let's see. Night Elf level 50. Uh, um, my first World of Warcraft character was also a Night Elf. All right. How do you use money and resources in your campaigns? How do you make money important, or do you hand wave it? This is a very campaign specific question for me. For instance, Curse of Strahd, I love how little money is in there, and my players have been feeling the burn on that for many, many levels. Not having money has really chapped their hide. Prices then being extra high has made things even worse for them. And in that campaign, it's very much worth tracking that money, and then occasionally giving opportunities where it can be the valuable resource. I like that it's such a lowered amount compared to what is in most adventures, because I feel like in a lot of the other adventures, money is just a scorecard for the most part. And then you get random spell components that you need to purchase, or that are of weird niche value, and those kinds of things that kind of screw things up. I like to have money tracked for the most part during the like first 3 tiers of play is of greatest importance. Once you get into the highest tiers of play, it becomes in ways less important, unless you're giving players the opportunity to really put that money into things. Some ways to make money a resource include real estate transactions, purchases of the large nature, purchasing of magic items, trade of magic items, the crafting of expensive items. Those are all ways that you can engage in the money thing. And I have a video on how to add magic item crafting to your campaigns. And I would recommend checking that one out as a means of, with relatively low overarching investment, making monetary resources valuable. If you're using the MSRP uh, price list for how much magic items are worth, or even if you're using sane magic items, then you can turn money into more of a resource and create more of an economy around magic items. But I would caution against just opening up the entire field of magic items for people. It's much better to hand a couple of potential options out there with exorbitant price tags and let people use their money wisely than it is to let them just have the 3.5 or Pathfinder-esque I can shop for whatever I want mentality that doesn't necessarily lead to the same magic items are valuable and special feel that 5th edition is designed around. Hope that answers your question on that one there. Let's see. Francisco, how did you get to be a DM as a job? Fair. I have a video on that as well about the company startplaying.games. It's a website service that matches dungeon masters with players. The dungeon masters there are all, like me, independent contractors who run games for hire, usually over the internet, though I understand they're finally able to start booking some in-person events now, which is really cool. But it happened to me during COVID, laid off as a waiter, and sitting around waiting for everything in my state to open back up so that I could go and do something. And my wife stumbled upon Start Playing Games, suggested it to me. I went and tried with another DM for a couple of months because I was concerned that maybe I wasn't good enough. I had imposter syndrome riding me pretty hard. And after playing with a very talented DM for a couple of months, I recognized things that I felt like he was better than me at, and things that I felt like I was better than him at. And if I was willing to pay him that price point, then I felt like it was reasonable for me to charge the same. And so I started my first campaign on Start Playing Games, filled up with players, and then just started adding more and more games as games completed, or as I was adding new ones to different days of the week. I slowly raised my prices to match the current values that were out there, and in order to make this something that I could live on, however tightly, and yeah, Start Playing Games was really the answer for me. They take like a 10% cut in order to match me up with players, and probably I don't technically need their service anymore, but I'm grateful for the service that they provide, and grateful that they take care of money so that I don't have to, and that they help me to find new players that aren't already in my ecosystem, because I've got some players that play 4 times a week. I've got players that have been playing with me since my first session on Start Playing Games, and they've all become real good friends, and I really appreciate their support. And I'd like to think from what they've told me that they appreciate the hard work I put into running a fun game week after week, and I hope that we get to continue for years and years and years. Thanks for the questions, Francisco. How diegetic? Night Elf, good word use there. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. How diegetic? How do you make your level ups in your campaigns? AKA, how do you include level ups in your story? Sometimes it feels weird getting a new skill after just defeating a big bad. So, I am a big proponent for the experience point system when it comes to level ups. I typically, my leveling up process for the games that I've run in the last year or two has involved a restriction that you could only level up after a long rest. And so when you reach the amount of XP at the end of a session, then during your next session at the long resting point, you're able to gain experience and go up to the next level. I've made exceptions for that in a couple of different ways with different levels of success. For one, in Curse of Strahd, I've written a customized story involving all of my players that they don't know about, that happened to them prior to the beginning of our Curse of Strahd campaign. and every time they reach enough experience points, they have a vision that they're going to receive when appropriately triggered by something random in their circumstances. And when they receive that vision, they level up to the next level instantaneously, minus any harm that has been done to them. And that represents the training that happened before in the story that is not actually currently ongoing, but the story that had happened prior to the story that's currently ongoing. And that one's been a lot of fun. Also, I have a desire for a increase and a return to older editions methods of requiring people to spend downtime on training. This does require that the campaign is going to allow significant amounts of downtime, and it can be a real brat when you're using the XP system and people level up and then they go multiple sessions without being able to go back and train. That really doesn't feel good for players. So that's the concern that I'm looking to work my way around. I essentially don't plot my level ups to the story when it comes to your overall question, because I don't use the milestone system. Now, that said, I think the milestone system can be a good system in certain campaigns. For instance, I'm running Strixhaven for my grandbabies, and it's pretty good for that one. Oh, look, I'm giving myself a thumbs up on accident. Good job. It can also be good if you are also implementing a downtime training system. Then milestone level ups make sense because you can plan in your story when there is going to be a break in the action. So it's not necessarily about you just defeated a big bad, but you just resolved a situation to where there is going to be a period of inactivity for your group wherein they can train before they go on the next mission. Particularly good for West March's style or episodic adventures. Things like the Keys of the Golden Vault do really well with that. Candlekeep's Mysteries, all the anthology adventures. You can easily craft this individual story and then come back and rest and train and get better than next individual story. And that takes off some of the weirdness of the like, well, I just defeated a big bad and now I have new skills that I don't get to use on the big bad that I was facing. So I hope that answers your question, Night Elf. I think that's a milestone is a specific tool for a specific campaign. XP is a specific tool for a specific campaign, and training is a specific tool that I wish was just the default. And then, even then, it has its dangers. And so there's times when it wouldn't make a good default. Francisco, great question. How do you handle the "is it lying" question from your players? So when it comes to insight, investigation, perception, etc., there are often times that people are asking one question, and I have, to some degree, trained myself to answer a different question. So, for instance, when somebody says, "Is he lying?" Well, their character is not asking, "Is he lying?" Their character is actually taking the time to carefully study the individual in question and look for clues as to what they're thinking and feeling. And so my answer to the question answers that question. What is this guy? What does this person appear like they are uh, thinking and feeling right now? So I might describe sweat on a creature's brow. I might describe a nervous fidget of fingers, tip tapping. I might describe a very purposefully blank poker face. I might describe them being fairly at ease and seeming to be comfortable. I might describe their fear or the other emotions that are involved. By describing the symptom of lying, what we're doing is allowing the player to gather information through their character's skill set that then drives them to make a decision about what their character thinks is going on. Because insight's not supposed to be a yes, no, are they lying? Yes, they're lying, or no, they're not lying. Instead, it's supposed to be something that allows you to get insight into what they are thinking and feeling. And so when you answer what they're thinking and feeling, I find that most players, though they still fall into the habit of asking if he's lying, or saying I want to check and see if he's lying, I don't call attention to that being wrong. I just move forward and answer the question that their character is actually asking. Just like when they tell me I swing my sword to slice this guy's head off. I don't narrate out a success on the attack roll as the guy's head going flying, unless his head goes flying. I narrate out the success of the attack, the narrow dodge, and the obvious addition of exhaustion and tiredness to the creature that's been struck at, and how narrowly he escaped that blow, and that he is harmed and weakened. All right, here we go with another question. I hope, Francisco, that answers your question. If you have further questions about it, and anybody who has further questions about anything that comes up in this video, definitely leave a comment afterwards, and I'll go back and answer everything, just like I always try to do. All right, Sulicius asks, hi Tim, hi Sulicius. If they add new stuff to the 2024 core D&D 5e books, but they have already said the page count would be similar, what would you take out of the core books if you had to? That is a fun question. What would I take out of the core books if I needed space for more options? Well, that is a fairly tough one, because most of these books, like their page count desire is pretty stinking tight. I would probably take out those portions that were setting dependent from the core rule books. Uh, Gods of the Multiverse, uh, the planes of existence, stories of specific individuals. I would remove anything that pertains to a specific story or the like. A lot of the books are being written nowadays with readability in mind, which I appreciate, but at the same time would probably be one of the first places I would sacrifice things in order to keep stuff going. I would lessen the number of monsters in the monster manual if I needed to, in order to not sacrifice on the quality of the individual monsters. If anything, I would love it if they only had a set number of design hours to take care of the monster manual. Like, take however long you need on each monster, and if I get half as many monsters in that book, I'll buy book number 2 gladly, if you will just make each of the monsters well designed, not boring, and with stuff that makes them flavorful and interesting. So definitely keep those kinds of things in there. When it comes to like the Dungeon Master's Guide, I would hesitate to wipe too much out, but probably it would involve yeah, again, it would be stuff related to, man, that's really tough. It's really tough. Such a great question. I think you've got me stumped. Frankly, I don't think I have a deeper or better answer than that. I would hate to see much taken out of the books. I would love to see a lot of it reworked. You've stumped me. Good job. I tell you what, I'm going to write that one down as one for the. I'm going to write that one down as something for a musing topic or a little bit more research, because I'm not sure what I would take out of the books. Good job. Let's see. Subsequent question to that. What about magic items and optional rules? I really feel like there's a great deal of value in a lot of the optional rules. I would like to see a lot of the optional rules be just rules, like just be available. But at the same time, I feel like they're good in being optional, so that players aren't always picking them, but rather they're great opportunities for like rule of cool utility. I often will have somebody say, "Well, I want to do this, and you can't do that in the rules," and then I'll be like, "Well, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's an optional rule that gets close, so we're going to use that, and that'll help me to fit it together." So I feel like there's good value in those magic items. I would love it if they had their own space, but the DMG makes sense as much as any for where they are. Particularly if we can get them actually balanced, that would be lovely. Um, and I do think that reordering the book would be a really would be a really good idea. I agree. Dungeon of Terror, great point. All right, I'm gonna get through to Night Elf. Had another question. What is your favorite fantasy book? Legend. Uh, I am a Salvatore nerd. I grew up on Dris Do'Urden, so that occupies the largest portion of my shelf. Though I was introduced to fantasy with David Eddings. And the Sparhawk series by David Eddings. There's two of them. The Elenium and the Malorn. No, the Elenium I think might be right. But anyway, I haven't read them in years. But the Sparhawk series is one of my favorite examples of like sort of D&D ish play that I really enjoy. Some of Eddings' more recent stuff I haven't bothered with, but that series was solid gold and load of fun. And then Salvatore, best fight scenes that are out there, in my opinion, for uh, evocative imagery that I can picture in my mind and see what's going on. So Salvatore. Um, do you think of monsters as bruisers, tanks, casters, or just the monsters for the situation? Nakaris asked. I would say uh, I wear two different hats. I wear a lot of different hats as a dungeon master. We all do. We all wear a lot of different hats when we're DMing and at different stages of the game. And I would say that uh, during the design phase of encounter building, situation building, etc., I spend more time thinking about creatures in terms of what their stat block allows them to do best than I do when I'm running the game. When I'm running the game, it's self-evident because of the design phase that the big burly guy who's there as a bodyguard is going to try to do bodyguardish things. And so I just try to run them according to their level of intellect and sophistication and the abilities that they have available. Just like player characters and just like everybody else, they have one hammer and they are going to try to turn everything in front of them into the nail in question. So if their hammer is a bow, they're going to try and pinion you from as far away as possible and avoid getting up close with you because that's their hammer and that's the nail. So you play them out according to that when you're in the circumstance, and I guess that kind of puts them into the bruisers, tanks, casters situation, but I don't think of them that way when I am fighting. When it comes to big bad evil guy's intelligence in determining creatures and fights, that is a situational question regarding essentially, does the big bad evil guy in question know about the characters in question? For instance, Curse of Strahd campaign, has Strahd already felt these guys out? Has he beat them up a little bit and slapped them around? Has he been scrying on them from afar with some blood that he got off of them on his first encounter, and so he's been watching their various fights? If so, absolutely. I am setting up. He is hunting down exactly the right tool for the job, so that when the time comes, the adventurers rue the day that they stepped into Barovia, because that's just who he is. He's a smart guy with a lot of resources at his disposal. Now, on the other hand, is the Earth Elemental Lord Ogremok going to have any control over that in Princes of the Apocalypse? No, not really. Like he's kind of out of it, and he doesn't really know anything about the characters. Maybe is Tiamat going to know about that? No, but is her minion Severin the Red going to know about that in the Tyranny of Dragons? Maybe. Has he been involved with the party, or has he been insulated? Has he gotten reports, or has the party killed absolutely everything that tried to run away with them for levels upon levels upon levels? Sorry, trauma. If if the bad guy has knowledge, then he should build it out. If he doesn't, then no, you really shouldn't. If possible, he should be going off of the experience level that they have and being like, well, they're adventurers, they're powerful. This is the general makeup. At that point, it's kind of a nice idea to build based on the ideal party, the rogue wizard cleric fighter sort of makeup, and if you can plan an encounter that would challenge that, then the fact that your group is actually a group of 6 horny bards is going to throw the encounter in very weird and wonderful directions, versus if you did indeed encounter that normal setup. All right. All right. Question. Hope that answered you, Karis. And there's a question here from Alexej. Oh, I'm going to brutalize that. Alexej. I apologize if I just ruined your name on the internet. In a self-made campaign, would you use a fantasy map knowing you are going to add stuff during the campaign, or just leave it out at all? Hmm. So, or a DM facing map. If we're talking a player facing map, then I would only do so if I was for sure only going to be adding things that were outside of that map, right? I maybe I could add villages and the like on there because they're too little to be included on the map and not super important. But I wouldn't make drastic changes to the map once it has hit the player, right? If it's only on my side of the table, then I can utilize it however I want as inspiration for what's going on, setting things out, and then I can make the adjustments later and build it out because I still haven't completed that far out of my world building yet. That makes it okay to utilize in that fashion. Sorry, I've got some small children who are interceding. Uh, so it's if something has hit the table and the players are aware of it, then it is immutable. At that point, it's not allowed to change because at that point you're threatening the design of your world. Every time I do have to do that because I screw up, because I make mistakes, right? Like everybody else, uh, that's when I know I'm like kicking myself. I really messed this up because I have to roll something back, and that screws with people's sense of the realism of their world that they're trying to get themselves involved in. So once it's in the player's hands, don't change it. If it's just in your hands, then it's okay. You can go ahead and mix and match it and move it around, and you're not going to break anything by doing that. Well, friends, we are at the end of our hour on this first session of the live Q&As. Thanks so much for joining. Thank you for submitting questions beforehand so that I could have some sort of organization. Thank you for sitting with me through the technologically impaired situation that I'm under, where working as a solo guy, I just can't spend time fiddling with getting the Q&A running while also running my mouth answering questions. I appreciate that you were here, and I hope that this was useful. Follow the link in the description to submit questions for next month's Q&A or ask them anywhere on the channel. I will always do my best to answer, and I appreciate you all. Thanks for watching. Happy adventuring.